morning, everyone, and welcome to this Yom Limmud, this morning of learning and Talmud Torah. It's a wonderful thing as a community that we can gather together and take advantage of this quieter time of year to learn Torah and to celebrate community and our appreciation of Torah. Before I say anything else, I want to thank those who made this morning possible, to thank our wonderful Louise, to thank Eddie Pollak, and to thank the Education Committee under the leadership of Julie Conn. Thank you to all of you for putting this together. We decided to dedicate this morning in memory of and Le'ilui Nishmas Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. In the first aftermath of the P'tira, we obviously all focused on the sense of communal and personal loss and the deep sense of pain that we all felt. But as time passes, Chazal teach us that in truth, ein osim nefoshes l'tzadikim, this is a Gemara, Yerushalmi, and Shkolim. The way we memorialize, remember tzadikim is not through creating matzevus, nefoshes, but rather divreim hein zichronom, through not speaking about their memory and their praises, but their words, the words they said, the values they taught, the lessons that we learn from that. This is the true way of remembering someone, a tzaddik, who is lost. And certainly the most important, perhaps, lesson that Rabbi Sacks taught all of us was that this isn't about edifices. This isn't even about institutions. It's certainly not about matzevas and memorials, but education, values, Talmud Torah. And so certainly this morning of Talmud Torah, of us learning together, is the most appropriate way for us to honor the memory of Rabbi Sacks. And we have a wonderful lineup here this morning, which we will hear as the morning progresses. But for now, I wanted to welcome our first speaker, Chief Rabbi Mirvis. And Rabbi Mirvis, we are truly honored that you are yet again gracing our community with your presence, this time virtually rather than face-to-face. But we really value the closeness and friendship that you continue to show us at Ner Yisrael. Rabbi Mirvis, in your weekly Dvar Torah, you spoke this week about Yaakov's journey down to Egypt and the confusion and uncertainty that surrounded this journey. You taught us that Yaakov and his family, when they descended to Egypt, they were uncertain, they were unclear about where they were up to on their journey. And you spoke about the way of navigating uncertainty and in difficult times, the key being bracha, blessing, counting our blessings, counting the blessings of others, showing appreciation, recognizing bracha. And in these difficult and confusing times, I really just wanted to thank you, Rabbi Mirvis, for being a voice of clarity and of leadership, and above all, bringing so much bracha and blessing to our community, to the wider Anglo community. So thank you so much, Rabbi Mirvis, for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rabbi Mirvis. Thank you, Rabbi Mirvis, and looking forward to hearing your Divrei Torah this morning.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zobin. Good morning, Shavua Tov to one and all. Thank you so much for the kind invitation extended to me to share some Divrei Torah with you. It is most appropriate that we dedicate our learning this morning Le'ilui Nishmat, my illustrious predecessor, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha. The finest way to memorialize a Talmid Chacham is through Talmud Torah, and that is exactly what we are doing. And Rabbi, huge eshakach to you for the wonderful leadership you're showing to your Kehillah during these very challenging times, and the messages that you have been sending out to your Kehillah and through your Kehillah to many others have been truly inspirational. You know, we're reading in the Torah at this time about the way in which Bnei Israel arrived in Goshen. Goshen has particular significance for us. In fact, the significance is embedded within the term Goshen, which has the root Gimel Shin. So Gesh reflects a situation in which one approaches but doesn't become part of. As we find in Vayigash, he approached. So in terms of Gesh, you have, for example, the Hebrew for a bridge, which is a Gesher, where you have two places on either side of a river or a valley. Thanks to the bridge, the people from either side can engage with each other socially and commercially, but they still maintain their absolute independence. And I've sometimes thought that perhaps the English word guest comes from the original same root, because a guest needs to know that while the host makes him or her feel totally at home and you become a ben bait, nonetheless, the time comes when you need to say goodbye and to go off to your own home, because gesh indicates you're part of, but you're still separate from. And that is certainly what Yaakov Avinu wanted his children, and through his children, Jewish people throughout all ages, to know that when we are outside of the land of Israel, we should be within a Goshen. That is to say that we have a responsibility to integrate, but not to assimilate, to be part of our society, to be proud of everything that is transpiring, to give a contribution of inestimable value, but at the same time to always remember that we are different. And the true way to appreciate that difference is through Talmud Torah, and that's why the Torah, as we have just recently read, tells us that the original occasion in which we came into Goshen, Chazal tell us Lahorot indicates to establish a makom of Torah. That's why Yehuda was sent by Yaakov Avinu ahead of the rest of the mishpacha, so that as soon as everybody would arrive, there would be a strong place of Torah learning, because it is through an appreciation of Torah that we are able to establish our roots, to be proud of what we are about, to integrate within our society, and at the same time to always know that we are proudly different. And that is our exercise this morning, and kol hakavod to the Ner Yisrael community, because the Talmud Torah, which is an integral part of Ner Yisrael, is something absolutely spectacular and a wonderful inspiration to all of us at all times. My challenging subject this morning is Torah perspectives on resilience. And this is something which is, of course, of particular relevance to all of us right now as we engage with the very challenging coronavirus. I'm going to be speaking about finding light within darkness, learning how we need to move forward and to derive inspiration, not despite our bad experiences, but because of them. But we should never lose sight of the reality of suffering. Suffering is real, and I don't in any way wish to indicate through the positivity that I would like to convey that we are minimizing the depth of suffering. And we find that that's what Bnei Israel endured, as we shall shortly be reading from the beginning of Sefer Shmot, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Mitzrayim, and he found that after so many years of Avdut, the spirit of the nation was crushed. And Moshe came along to them with the glorious, wonderful good news, as we read at the beginning of Parashat Ve'era. It's the Arba Leshonot Geula, which we remember to this day through the Arba Kosot, which we drink at the Seder of Pesach. V'hotzeti, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. And after hearing this reassurance, what was the response of Bnei Yisrael? V'lo sham'u el Moshe mikotze ruach u'me'avodah kasha. Meant nothing to them. Lo shamu. Why? Because of the impatience of their spirit, because of the burden of their avdut. And indeed, this is what happens, you know, when people come to those who are suffering and they say, snap out of it or move forward. You don't have to worry. Everything will be all right. V'lo shamu. People don't listen to that. That doesn't bring any reassurance. What does bring reassurance? Change. Change of circumstances for the better, and as we shall discover, change with regard to our attitude and what we are willing to do within tough and challenging circumstances. You know, there is one pasuk which I contemplate on during these times more than any other, and I'm sure you all do. Rabot machshavot levish v'atzat Hashem itakum. that wonderful pasuk from Sefer Mishlei, where Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Rabot machshavot levish, you have so many thoughts, so many intentions, so many desires. Vatzat Hashem hi takum. You know, our diaries were filled way back in March of last year, of 2020. Vatzat Hashem hi takum. It's the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which has prevailed. So different in terms of our plans for Pesach, our summer holidays, plans for Yamim Noraim, Sukkot, winter break. It's all been very, very different. But let me share with you a beautiful insight by Rav Shlomo Wolbe, Zichrono Livracha, the Mashgiach Ruchani of Yeshivat Be'er Yaakov. So this was his perush. Rabot machshavot levish. In times of difficulty, when we are suffering, Rabot machshavot, there are many thoughts. The thoughts that go through our minds. Sometimes they are black thoughts. Sometimes they are dark thoughts. Because life is tough. Vatzat Hashem hi. What is the eitzah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu during times such as this? Vatzat Hashem hi takum. Get up. This is the time for you to show resilience. This is the time to be positive. Don't allow yourself to sink lower and lower during these challenging moments. And it is here that we need to appreciate our concept of nechama. Resilience is the key term that people are speaking about at this time, but the term, the English word resilience, is imperfect. You see, it comes from the Latin, which means to leap back, to rebound. But you can't do that. You can't turn the clock back because the situation has changed. And therefore, we have to come to terms with the new reality. The Hebrew word for resilience is chosen, inoculation. It too is imperfect because when you're inoculated, okay, you're now impermeable. You're fine. Nothing can affect you. It's all over. It's behind you. But that doesn't happen when it comes to the travails of life because you can never, ever totally get over something. It will always be part of you, at least in your self-conscience. So we have a different concept. It's the concept of nechama. It's within the spirit of the teaching of Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal, who always differentiates between Goral and Yi'ud. Goral is my fate, Yi'ud is my destiny. Goral is the hand of cards that is dealt to me. Yi'ud is how I play that hand of cards. I have no control whatsoever over my Goral, but I can control my Yi'ud. And we have it within our power and capacity to construct a destiny of glory. That's something which we can do regardless of circumstances. So the term we use is nechama. Now, nechama is not just to be comforted and to feel, everything is now all right. No. The term nechama implies change. So we find in Shemot Perek Lamed Bet, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I think I'm going to wipe out this nation. What does Moshe Rabbeinu say to Hashem? Shuv mecharon apecha vehinachem ala ra'a le'amecha. Vehinachem, have nechama. What does Moshe mean? Please, Hashem, do a U-turn. This is what you intended to do. Vehinachem ala ra'a. Please, don't bring about that ra'ah to the nation. And then we read, Vayinachem Hashem ala ra'a shediber lasot le'amor. There was indeed a U-turn, a change of direction. Ki nichamti ki asitim. Similarly in Sefer Breshit, nechama means to change. So therefore, in our tradition, resilience is not a process of closure, but rather of disclosure. You can't fully, totally put that sadness, those challenges behind you, but what you can do is to disclose your real self, to reveal elements of your character and your ability, which now you can bring forward in order to get through a very difficult period. And when you come to think of it, Hasn't this been the recipe of Am Yisrael for our survivor? After each and every national catastrophe, the prevailing paradigm has been inoperable, and our way of survival has been through a paradigm shift. That's what happened at the time of the Churban. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai prepared for this before the Churban, because he realized that as soon as the Churban would take place, there would be a gap, and we would need something, a change of emphasis. Until the Churban, Am Yisrael was totally surrounded and connected to the Beit Mikdash. But after the Churban, we needed something to replace the Beit Mikdash. Through the Beit Midrash. And that's why Yavne was established in order to replace the Beit Mikdash. There was a difference of emphasis. Talmud Torah keneged kulam, it would be Talmud Torah, which would enable Am Yisrael to survive. And then again, further to the expulsion of the Jewish people from Spain in 1492, how were we capable of surviving? What we then turned to was Jewish mysticism. That is how Kabbalah developed in order to give new spirit and promise to the nation. Between 1648 and 1656, during those 8 years, we had the tragedy brought to us by Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Yemach Shmo v'Zichro. Over 100,000 precious Jewish souls were murdered. And what was our response at that time? That gave birth to Chassidut, a new way of Jewish life through which we would rejoice. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, through which we would emotionally connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the finest example of a paradigm shift came in the 1940s. Only 3 years after the greatest tragedy that has ever befallen our people, and probably the greatest tragedy ever experienced by any nation in the history of the world, we had the establishment of Medinat Israel. It was a paradigm shift. And it's thanks to the existence of Medinat Israel that Am Yisrael now is anchored within our promised land. And there was a second paradigm shift, an emphasis of Talmud Torah. It was the way in which, in the aftermath of the Shoah, throughout the Jewish world, Talmud Torah would come to the fore. And one could see, for example, how in America, one saw the establishment of yeshivot in a way that hadn't existed before. This was our response to the Shoah, and so it has been throughout the Jewish world. And thanks to Medinat Yisrael, and thanks to the possibilities for Talmud Torah for Jewish men and women today, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish nation, is able to survive. So Baruch Hashem, we are able to cope. Now, in Sefer Breshit, we're told how, in the aftermath of the Mabul, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought about a keshet be'anan, a rainbow amongst the clouds. So what is the message of the rainbow? You will notice there in Parshat Noach, there are no less than 5 occasions within only 2 psukim the term anan, cloud, is mentioned. The phenomenon of the keshet is directly linked to the anan. And what we find, therefore, is that the light that comes from the sun, which passes through the dark clouds, emerges on the other side of the clouds to produce a rainbow. The brilliance of the rainbow can only be achieved thanks to the fact that that light passes through and is diffused through going through those clouds. And therefore, from the rainbow we learn that it is not despite the clouds of darkness that we endure that we're able to find rainbow-styled spectacular forms of existence. It's because of those clouds of darkness. So we can, with our nechama, effect change. We can have a response to darkness in our lives. And in actual fact, what we can find is it is a process of disclosure, because thanks to the darkness, we will discover capability and capacity beyond which we ever dreamt we had. And the finest example of this, I find, are our Holocaust survivors. The people who give me more inspiration than anyone else. They show with their positivity, with the way in which they reflect the most wonderful approach to life, that it's not despite what they've endured, but because of it, that they are able to give hope, not just to Am Yisrael, but to everyone on earth. There's a pasuk in Mishle, Ki sheva yipol tzadik vakam. A good person falls 7 times and then gets up. And usually the way in which we explain this is, a tzaddik, a good person, can fall 7 times, but can get up. Why? Because the tzaddik realizes that if he or she is not for themselves, if they don't look to themselves in order to pick themselves up, nobody will be able to do it for them. That's how our Mefarshim explain it. Im ein ani li mili. If I'm not for myself, who can be with me? All the professionals, all the relatives in the world might want to come and assist Im ein ani li, but if I myself won't want to move forward to pick myself up out of the depths of anguish and suffering, nobody can do it for me. It's something that we have to do for ourselves. Ki sheva yipol tzadik vakam. He himself needs to pick himself up. But Rav Yitzchak Hutner, Zatzal, the Rosh Yeshiva Yeshivat Chaim Berlin in New York, he had a different parish. Ki sheva yipol tzadik vakam, he explained, on account of falling 7 times, the tzaddik will get up. It's not despite, it is because of. And there is a wonderful example in Tanakh. I wonder if you've ever thought of contrasting David HaMelech with Shaul HaMelech, the first 2 Melachim of Am Yisrael. Shaul HaMelech, when he came to power, we're told how Shmuel HaNavi went to appoint him, and he was Mishichmo V'mala, head and shoulders above everyone else. Literally, he was a tall person. He had Hadrat Panim, but also he was somebody who had a perfect record, an outstanding track record of leadership, a man who was not known to have made any mistakes. And what happened to Shaul HaMelech? Within only 2 years, he lost the Melucha. What should have happened was that all the other kings should have come from him, and eventually the Mashiach would have been Mashiach ben Shaul. It didn't happen. Shaul HaMelech crumbled under the weight of the responsibility of leadership. It's lonely up at the top. At the time when Amalek was threatening the Jewish nation and things started to go wrong, Shaul HaMelech had no experience of making mistakes. So what did he do? He tried to blame others. He pinned it on David, tried to have him assassinated. He became severely, deeply depressed, needed to be comforted. Contrast that with David HaMelech. He was the king for 40 years. 7 years over Judah, 33 years over all of Israel. How did David HaMelech start out? The Midrash tells us David HaMelech started out as a failure, rejected by his family, not somebody whom they considered to have any talent or ability. An outcast, says the Midrash. Shmuel HaMelech comes to the family of Yishai to anoint the next king of Israel. The sons line up. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, it's none of them. So who can it be? Have you got anybody else? Yeah, it can't be him. David is brought in. And then in the course of time, he showed he had incredible ability. Why? Because he learned the lessons of what had transpired when he was a shepherd. He learned the lessons of what had happened in the midst of his misery when he was an outcast, when his family turned their backs on him. David HaMelech had gone through the pain of suffering at the hands of others. His goral had been an awful one. But look at the Yehud, the destiny that he carved out. And that's why when things started to go wrong, where did David HaMelech look? Of course, Daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and was the creator of the Tehillim, but he also looked to himself to acknowledge that he could also make mistakes. Don't blame others. And that's why when he sinned with Bathsheba, his immortal words in Tehillim were, V'chatati negdi tamid, I am the one to blame. David HaMelech looked to himself. When things went wrong with Avshalom, he looked to himself. And that's how he was able to be a great leader, because it was through his experiences that he was able to learn lessons and to apply them through the life ahead of him. Kisheva Yibol Tzadik Vakam, he was a tzaddik. He fell so often, but he was able to lift himself up. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says beautifully, Even Masu Habonim Hayetale Rosh Pina. That's an autobiographical comment of David HaMelech. Even Masu Habonim, that's me, he was saying. I'm the stone that the builders of the nation had rejected. I was the outcast. Hayetale Rosh Pina. But I've been able to rebuild myself to become the cornerstone because I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned from adversity. And adversity sometimes comes as a maaseh breshit. It can come directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but sometimes adversity comes because other people bring us that pain, and sometimes it comes because of our own mistakes. I always remember when I was Rabbi of Kinloss years ago, and I visited a lady in hospital. She had just undergone surgery because she had broken her leg. And she was running for a bus and she tripped. And she was in hospital. And she's, the question so many people ask the rabbi when he's visiting. And she said, Rabbi, why did God do this to me? And I said, I'm not God. I can't tell you. But I can think of one thing. I think one message that you've received from this is, next time you run for a bus, be more careful. The right question to ask is not always, why did God do this to me? Sometimes it's, what did I do? Where did I go wrong? And also when other people cause us suffering, we need to look at it as an opportunity. Neged What's the pshat of these words? Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What's the pshat? So I'll share with you a pshat that I learned. It was the 1990s. The fax machine had just been invented. And somebody in America came up with an idea. It was Rabbi Jack Reamer, whoever that was. He called it Torah fax. And he promised, he said, if you subscribe for $400, every Monday you will receive out of your fax machine a ready-made sermon for the following Shabbos. So I was one of the many suckers, and I subscribed to Torah fax. I didn't get a huge amount of ideas, but I will share you one beautiful idea from Torah fax. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai. What's the pshat? The day will come when I will invite my enemies to come to a Suda. I'll sit them down at my table and I'll drink a l'chaim to them. And I'll say to them, you closed a door in my face, but you know what happened? That closed door opened so many other doors to me. It's thanks to what I went through as a result of the suffering that you gave me that I am who I am today. Toda Rabbah. That's the attitude we need to have. And it only comes through nechama. When we change our attitude, when we change our circumstances, when we grasp hold of opportunities, thanks to what we have endured in the past. Let me conclude with the tefillah that we recite, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. You know, it's a natural human desire. Let's go back to the good old days. Chadesh yameinu kekedem. When are those good old days? When are the glorious days? When do we want to go back to? It's a great question to ask a classroom of children. In Jewish history, what's the time If you had a time machine, what's that moment that you would press the button for to enable the machine to transport you back to that particular moment in time? Hashivenu Hashem Elecha. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. The Midrash Eicha Rabati tells us, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem is going back to the moment immediately after Adam v'Chava had been banished from Gan Eden. So you might say, Ribono Shel Olam, if you're going back that far, why don't you go back a little bit further into Gan Eden itself? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we'd be living in Gan Eden? But the Midrash says no. We go back to the moment immediately after we were banished from Gan Eden. At that moment, we had learned from an experience. We had learned from how we had gone wrong in Gan Eden. We were just about to press the reset button for all of humankind, with potential to do right or to do wrong, to sin or to perform mitzvot, with all those opportunities in front of us, having the potential to go wrong or to suffer, on the other hand, to do what is right and to live a life of bracha. That's where we want to be taken back to. Because when you can learn from experiences and from suffering, when you know what it's like to have been banished from a Gan Eden, when you know what it's like when incredible opportunities have slipped through your fingers, but through that experience you're able to say, Ribono Shel Olam, thank you now. I can move forward. I can press the reset button and I can grasp hold of opportunities for the future. All of humankind now is on a journey. It's a very difficult journey. It's particularly difficult for us because way back in March, we thought, okay, it would be a few months and then we'd get back on the right foot. It's taking an awful amount of time. But Baruch Hashem, now that vaccines are being rolled out, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we now, like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, need to prepare for a new era. Ever since 1945, we've been living in the post-war era. From 2021 onwards, it will be the post-virus era. And we need to engage in nechama. We need to learn the lessons of what we have gone through and to move forward in a positive and a constructive way, to always recognize the sadness of what has transpired and what we're still going through, and at the same time to appreciate those opportunities. Let us recognize what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has brought upon us. Let us recognize what others have done to us. Let us recognize our own mistakes. And most of all, through nechama, not despite our experiences, but because of them, let's build a new way of living, full of ruach, full of connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, full of mitzvot, through of Talmud Torah, full of great opportunities to enhance our lives, and through what we do to enhance the lives of others. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu only bless us with briyut hanefesh, briyut haguf, and much hatzlacha. And may all of you be blessed as individuals, as families, as a community, with Klal Yisrael, and amongst all of humankind. V'chin yhi ratzon v'nomar. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi Mirvis, for those words of chizuk, of positivity, of sensitivity, the mussar, the teachings and the lessons, and of course the beautiful Divrei Torah that you shared with us. Thank you for taking that idea of nechama and resilience and giving with that so much in both the micro, the personal, and also the macro, that sweeping vision of nechama as a tool to understanding the paradigm shifts in our history of Chassidus, Kabbalah, Talmud Torah, Medinat Yisrael. And V'atzas Hashem Hitakum, that beautiful idea you shared from Rav Wolbe, I learned in Be'er Yaakov, so I have a particular appreciation of the Torah of Rav Wolbe. Thank you so much for sharing that also with us. And Emir Hashem, as Chief Rabbi concluded, Chadesh Yomeinu Kekedem, may we be restored, may we be strengthened, Yomeinu Kekedem, taking the lessons of what we've experienced going forward, but renewed and refreshed from this. Thank you again so much for joining us and giving us that chizuk that we also badly needed, and these messages we also valued and desperately needed to hear. Thank you.